I'm here to prove to you that size does in fact beat technique. This video is about one of humanity's most cherished myths and why the data suggests it's completely wrong.
You think you beat me in a street fight?
By anybody, any size.
You think so? Nah, you really think so? No, I'm 260.
I said probably.
For decades, we've been sold a story that a smaller, skilled fighter can defeat a larger, less trained opponent. That technique trumps size. That David beats Goliath.
Bradley Martin has no chance.
Against 125
He has no
fighter.
chance.
Copium. Because when researchers analyzed over 2,000 professional combat sport matches, tracked biomechanical research on force generation, and looked at what actually happens when weight classes disappear, the physics just doesn't care about your anime training montage. But before I show you the data, I want you to commit to an answer. I went out and asked people this exact question, and I want you to answer it too, right now, before I tell you what the research says. Imagine these three people in a fight. No rules, no time limit. Who wins? Option A, 140 kilogram, that's 300 pounds, bodybuilder, enormous, strong, but zero fight training. Option B, 100 kilogram, dad bod guy, that's like 230 pounds, above average strength, but still no training. Option C, a 70 kilogram martial artist, so 150 pounds, black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, years of various martial arts training. I want you to pause right now and put your answer in the comments, A, B, or C. I'll wait. Done? Good, because what you just picked tells me something important about what you've been taught to believe. Let me show you what people said.
The martial artist.
The martial artist?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have trust in him.
Okay.
Between these two.
Okay.
Okay.
This not because he can't move.
Yeah, maybe he's too big. I will say this one.
Okay.
No, I think.
Yeah,
the
maybe
big
he's small little. He can like.
But
See?
Yeah.
He's so small though.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
The weight is not important. The technique.
Outside of Mall, I interviewed 8 people. Every single one chose the martial artist. Now, some were split between the martial artist and the dad bod, but not a single person picked the 300-pound bodybuilder. A few were split between the martial artist and the dad bod guy, which, by the way, guys, how is this the top result in Google Images for dad bod? Absolutely nobody picked the 300-pound bodybuilder. Then I went to a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym where people who actually train in a martial art, and you guessed it, all 3 of them picked the martial artist to win. Technique is king. But here's what's interesting. So then I asked them a follow-up question. What matters most in fighting? Size, technique, speed, or strength?
Technique.
Technique?
I think speed. Maybe speed and technique.
To me, size and technique.
Size and technique?
I would say technique maybe too. Yeah.
Okay. The results were overwhelmingly similar. Technique was the most frequent choice, then speed, then size, then only one person actually chose strength. Size and strength came in last. And why wouldn't they think that? This is the story we've been told our entire lives. Every martial arts movie, every anime twink, every martial arts school advertisement. The message is always the same. Technique and size. A smaller person can defeat a larger opponent using leverage and skill. Look, it's not about strength, it's about knowledge. Size doesn't matter. We built an entire cultural mythology around this idea. It's inspiring, it's empowering, it's the underdog story we want to believe. And most of the people I talked to, most of them had been in actual physical altercations. 4 of the 8 people outside the mall had experienced some kind of fight. 1 on the playground as a kid, 2 in college brawls, another was more trying to break up a drunk group harassing his friends. And at the BJJ gym, 1 worked as a bouncer, where someone grabbed his throat, but he was able to de-escalate. Another stepped in where a bully was smashing a friend's guitar in class. These aren't people living in a theoretical bubble, they've experienced conflict and they still chose technique over size. Because that's what we've all been taught. The only problem is, it's wrong. Or at least it's way more complicated than anyone wants to admit. In 2023, researchers analyzed 2,000 professional combat athletes, 708 MMA fighters, and 1,392 boxers. They looked at weigh-ins, post-weigh-in weight gain, and fight outcomes. And here's what they found. For every 1% increase in body mass, fighters had a 7% higher likelihood of winning in MMA and a 13% higher likelihood of winning in boxing. Let that sink in. These are professionals, people with years of training, people who know technique, and yet the guy who weighs more, even by just a few percent points, even by just a few pounds, has a measurable statistical significant advantage. Another study tracked 1,400 MMA weigh-ins and found the same pattern. Each 1% of rapid weight gain after weigh-in corresponded to a 4.5% increased chance of victory. This isn't anecdotal. This isn't, well, sometimes the bigger guy wins. This is a dose-response relationship. More weight equals higher win probability. But wait, what about Royce Gracie, the 175-pound guy who beat opponents 50, 70, even 100 pounds heavier at the first UFC tournaments? Doesn't that prove technique beats size? That's exactly what I thought until I looked at what happened next. November 12th, 1993, Denver, Colorado. A one-night tournament with no weight classes, no time limits, and almost no rules. Royce Gracie, weighing 178 pounds, stepped into the octagon against opponents who outweighed him by 50 to 100 pounds. Then he did it again at UFC 2, UFC 3, and UFC 4. Triangle chokes, rear naked chokes, submissions that made giants tap out. It looked like magic, and it seemed to prove definitively that technique conquers size. But there's a critical detail everyone forgets. Royce Gracie wasn't just skilled, he possessed knowledge his opponents literally didn't know existed. In 1993, almost nobody in America understood ground fighting. These guys were strikers, brawlers. Some may have been wrestlers, but had never seen a triangle choke before. They didn't know how to defend it because they didn't know it existed. It wasn't just skill versus size, it was secret knowledge versus ignorance. But watch what happens next. As more fighters learned ground fighting, as the knowledge spread and skill levels equalized, something fascinating happened. The bigger guys started winning again. By 1997, the UFC introduced weight classes. By 2000, they were mandatory. By 2010, every major combat sport organization had them. Why? Because once everyone knows Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, once the techniques are no longer secret, the physics reasserts itself. That's when I started asking, what exactly are the physics? Let me show you something. Imagine two fighters, both throw the exact same punch with perfect technique. Same speed, same form, everything identical except one variable, body mass. Fighter A weighs 70 kilograms. Fighter B weighs 100 kilograms. Kinetic energy, the energy transferred in the impact, is 1/2 mass times velocity squared. If velocity is constant, kinetic energy scales linearly with mass. So Fighter B's punch carries 43% more kinetic energy, not because of better technique, because of physics. But it gets worse, or better depending on whose side you're on. In 2024, researchers dissected 896 muscles from 34 human cadavers and measured something called physiological cross-sectional area, basically force generating capacity of a muscle. They found that muscle force capacity doesn't scale linearly with body size. It scales with body mass to the power of 1.17. That's called positive allometry. Well, I don't know. It's a fancy way of saying larger people don't just have more muscle, they have disproportionately more force generating capacity. So let's do the math. A 100 kilo person versus a 70 kilo person. Muscle mass ratio, 1.54 times more muscle. That's 54% more force capacity ratio. 1.44 times, that's 44% more force. The bigger fighter can generate nearly half again as much force, even with identical technique. And that's just a strike. What about absorbing damage? Or getting hit. Research on impact biomechanics found that high BMI individuals absorbed 3 times more total energy and 1.8 times more energy per kilogram of body mass compared to low BMI individuals. Larger bodies have more soft tissue for padding, larger skeletal structures spreading forces over greater areas, and higher absolute energy absorption before reaching injury thresholds. So the bigger fighter hits harder and can take more damage. Now we're starting to see why weight classes exist. And this is important. Size isn't a free lunch. There's something called an inverted U relationship in exercise science. Performance increases with size, up to a point. Then it declines. Cardiovascular capacity doesn't scale linearly with body mass. VO2 max, your aerobic capacity, scales with body mass to the power of 0.82, meaning as you get bigger, your endurance gets worse relative to your size. Studies of American football linemen with BMI over 30 show 52% greater cardiovascular disease mortality risk, even among athletes. Metabolic syndrome prevalence was 3 to 4 times higher in the heaviest weight classes. And there's the mobility penalty. Higher mass means more momentum. More momentum means you need exponentially more force to change direction quickly. Research on power athletes show they can generate high force, but they demonstrate 37% greater power loss in repeated efforts compared to endurance athletes. So there's a sweet spot. Too small and you're giving up too much force generation. Too large and you're giving up too much mobility and endurance. Elite combat athletes measured via body composition scans show optimal body fat ranges of 10 to 12% for males, 16 to 20% for females. Walk around weight should be 12 to 15% above competition weight. Go beyond 18 and performance measurably declines. And there's real-world evidence of this ceiling effect. Stefan Struve, 6'11", 260 pounds, had extreme size advantages in the UFC. He achieved only moderate success. Fighters exceeding 270 pounds consistently show a pattern: cardio collapse in extended exchanges, gassing out by round 3. losing to smaller but better conditioned opponents. Remember that, we'll come back to it. So where's the tipping point? At what size difference does technique stop mattering? Combat sports data shows something fascinating. Within weight classes where fighters differ by maybe 5, 10, 15 pounds, technique still dominates. Skill variance is still the greatest predictor of outcome. But when you look at open weight competitions where there are no weight restrictions, statistical analysis of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu absolute divisions, that's no weight limit category, found that winners are statistically almost always over 90 kilograms. That's 198 pounds. Lightweight fighters, 62 to 77 kilograms, were described as having no statistical chance against heavier competitors. And this is at equal skill levels. The most successful absolute division champions, Marcus Buchecha Almeida, 6 titles at 218 pounds. Royce Gracie, 3 titles at a similar weight. Marcelo Garcia, one of the greatest pound-for-pound grapplers ever, weighed 170 pounds, and at his best, he won bronze and silver medals in the absolute division. He never won gold when facing the largest competitors. And here's the thing, these are world-class athletes with decades of training. If technique could overcome a 30, 40, 50 pound disadvantage, these are the people who would do it. And they just can't. At least not consistently enough to win single elimination tournaments. So let me take you back to those people I interviewed. Remember, technique was their number one choice, speed was second, size and then strength came in dead last. But here's what's fascinating about the people I talked to. The guy who got punched breaking up a drunk group, he said technique matters most. The person who witnessed playground fight as a kid, technique. The bouncer who had someone grab his throat, technique. But most of the people I interviewed outside the mall, none of them had serious martial arts training. A few took classes as kids, maybe for a year at most. That's it. So let me get this straight. People with minimal training who've been in actual physical altercations are confidently declaring that technique, which they don't possess, beats size and strength. Look, that's not criticism, that's evidence of how deeply this myth has penetrated our collective consciousness. We've been so thoroughly conditioned by decades of martial arts mythology, the movies, the marketing, the underdog narratives, that even people who've experienced violence firsthand still believe the Hollywood version. And I get it, because the Hollywood version is inspiring. All the guys at the BJJ gym, of course they want to believe technique can overcome a size disadvantage. I mean, that's empowering. The myth isn't just a misconception, it's a psychological shield. It makes an unfair world feel more fair. But here's the thing about reality, it doesn't care about what makes us feel better. So why does this matter just beyond settling bar arguments or about who'd win in a fight? Because this myth has real consequences. Self-defense instructors promise that a 5'2", 120-pound woman can defend herself against a 6'2", 220-pound attacker if she just learns the right techniques. Martial arts schools market themselves on the premise that size doesn't matter. Parents send their kids to karate classes believing it'll protect them from bullies twice their size. And look, training absolutely matters. The research shows that 66 to 71% of strength variance is unexplained by body size alone. Technique, conditioning, mental toughness, strategy, these things are real and they matter enormously. But most of the research was done studying regulated, sanctioned combat sports like grappling or MMA, where weight classes exist. Within reasonable size differentials, say 20 to 30 pounds, skill absolutely can compensate. A 150-pound trained fighter likely has the advantage over a 180-pound untrained opponent. Technique gives you options that an untrained person doesn't have. It increases your odds and it can absolutely save your life in the right circumstances. But when the size disparity becomes extreme, 40, 50, 100 pounds, and especially when both people have some level of training, bruh, physics reasserts itself. And pretending otherwise doesn't empower anyone, it just sets them up for a dangerous surprise. So let's return to our original question. We have a 140 kilogram bodybuilder, 100 kilogram dad bod, and a 70 kilogram martial artist. Who wins? Well, here's what everyone on the street expected me to say. The martial artist dominates both. And maybe when you clicked on this video and you learned the premise, maybe you thought I would say the bodybuilder or the dad bod would win. But the actual answer is more interesting than that. This isn't a linear hierarchy, it's more like a rock, paper, scissors. Let's start with A versus C. The 300-pound bodybuilder versus the 150-pound martial artist. The size differential here is simply too large. We're talking about a 70 kilogram, which is a 150-pound gap. The force generation advantage, the damage absorption capacity, the martial artist would need perfect execution, and the bodybuilder would need to make massive mistakes, likely going to the ground first. Could it happen? Sure, but you're betting against physics. Now, B versus C, the 230-pound dad bod versus the 150-pound martial artist. This is where it gets interesting. The size gap is significant, 30 kilograms, about 80 pounds, not insurmountable. If the dad bod guy has zero training, the light martial artist maybe wins. Royce Gracie taught us that the martial artist probably wins, but technique does give you takedowns, submissions, and the ability to slip punches and strikes. But And this is critical, but if that dad bod guy has any combat training, especially any real live training, then that 80-pound advantage neutralizes a significant portion of the skill gap. The research shows this. At equal skill levels, even 30 pounds is decisive. With just some training, the bigger guy's advantage becomes enormous. But here's where it gets really interesting. A versus B. The 300-pound bodybuilder versus the 230-pound dad bod. Maybe you think the bigger guy wins, more mass, more force, more everything, but remember what I said about the inverted U relationship, about how there's a performance ceiling when you get too large? The bodybuilder is likely beyond that ceiling. His cardiovascular system can't support that much muscle mass in extended activity. He'll gas out. Meanwhile, the dad bod guy is still mobile, can absorb punishment, and can outlast him. And I can prove it. Because you see, this 300-pound bodybuilder that I showed you in the street interviews, that's Mariusz Pudzianowski, 5-time World's Strongest Man champion. Literally one of the strongest humans who's ever lived. At 310 pounds, he decided to try MMA fighting. His massive muscles burned through oxygen in the opening minutes. He got TKO'd in the second round, repeatedly, against opponents 50, 60, 70 pounds lighter than him. The man who could flip cars, pull trucks, lift half-ton stones, couldn't last 3 rounds in a fight. So the actual answer to our question isn't A, B, or C. C probably beats B if B has 0 training. B probably beats C if B has any grappling, has any training. A probably beats C through sheer physics, but B probably beats A because A exceeds the performance ceiling. Rock, paper, scissors, with size, skill, and conditioning all playing different roles. The universe is more complicated than technique beats size or size beats technique. It's contextual. It's conditional. And that's actually way more interesting. But guys, here's the one thing about everything I just showed you. This entire video assumes something that almost never happens in real life. A one-on-one, unarmed, consensual fight, like in the movies, which is not how real-world violence works. Most assaults aren't fair fights. They involve weapons, multiple attackers, surprise, terrain, escape routes. So if you're watching this and thinking, okay, great, now I know the martial artist loses to the 300-pound bodybuilder, you're actually still thinking like we're in a movie. So click here to watch my last video where not only do I ask the question, is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu the best martial art for self-defense, but is there a best martial art for self-defense?